The sound came out of nowhere. A sharp slap, loud enough to cut through the quiet hum of the lobby. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Shoes froze against polished floors. Even the receptionist looked up in shock. A young woman stood near the front desk, her hand pressed against her cheek, eyes wide, trying to process what had just happened. In front of her, a man stood tall. Unapologetic. Unbothered. Like this wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. "Watch where you're going," he muttered coldly, adjusting his sleeve as if nothing had happened. No one moved. Not the security guard near the entrance. Not the employees standing just a few feet away. Some glanced at each other, then quickly looked down. Others reached for their phones. But not to help. To record. And just a few steps away, leaning quietly against the wall, stood Keanu Reeves. No suit. No bodyguards. Just a worn leather jacket, slightly faded jeans and old sneakers. He didn't say a word. Didn't rush forward. Didn't raise his voice. But his eyes. They were locked on the man. Watching. Measuring. Waiting. To anyone else he looked like just another visitor. Someone who didn't belong in a place like this. Someone easy to ignore. The woman's breathing grew uneven. She looked around hoping, just hoping, someone would step in. Anyone. But the silence only got heavier. The man let out a quiet scoff. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," he said, almost amused. A few nervous laughs echoed faintly from the background. And that's when something shifted. Not in the room. But in Keanu. His posture straightened slightly. His gaze hardened, not with anger but with something far more controlled. Deliberate. He took one slow step forward. Then another. Still calm. Still silent. But now, he wasn't just watching anymore. The tension in the lobby didn't disappear. It settled. Hung in the air like something unfinished. The woman slowly lowered her hand from her cheek, still shaken. A faint red mark remained, impossible to ignore, but somehow, everyone tried to. The man who hit her adjusted his cuff again, completely at ease. Like he belonged. Like nothing could touch him. And in a way he believed that. Because in this building, power wasn't always about titles. It was about perception. Confidence. Fear. And right now he had all three. People stepped aside as he moved, giving him space without being asked. Not out of respect, but out of quiet submission. No one challenged him. No one questioned him. No one even asked if the woman was okay. Except one person. Standing just a few steps behind, Keanu Reeves watched everything unfold with unsettling calm. To everyone else he was invisible. Just another man who didn't fit the environment. His jacket looked worn. His shoes slightly scuffed. No badge. No sign of authority. And that was exactly why no one paid attention to him. What they didn't know. What no one in that entire lobby realized. Was that Keanu wasn't a visitor. He wasn't lost. And he definitely wasn't unimportant. He was the reason this building existed. Years ago he helped build the company from the ground up. Quietly. Strategically. While others chased attention he stayed behind the scenes. While others fought for titles he focused on control. Ownership. Decisions that shaped everything. He held 53% of the company. More than anyone else. Enough to hire, or fire, every single person in that building. But he never used it to impress people. He stayed away. Meetings happened without him. Decisions were made in rooms he never entered. Reports were sent, approved, archived. All without his physical presence. And over time, people got comfortable. Too comfortable. They stopped asking questions. Stopped wondering who was really watching. Who was really in control. That's why today mattered. Because today, Keanu Reeves walked in unannounced. No calls ahead. No warning. No special treatment. He didn't come to make an entrance. He came to observe. To see what the company had become when no one thought he was looking. And now, he was seeing it, clearly. A woman humiliated in public. A man abusing power without consequence. An entire lobby full of witnesses. Choosing silence. That told him more than any report ever could. The man who caused it all turned slightly, noticing the stares fading away. His confidence returned instantly. Problem solved, he muttered under his breath, almost proud. Then he glanced toward the hallway, preparing to walk off as if this moment meant nothing. As if it would be forgotten in minutes. But it wouldn't be. Because just behind him, Keanu took another step forward. Not rushed. Not aggressive. But intentional. Every movement measured. Every second deliberate. He wasn't stepping in blindly. He was stepping in with understanding. Because this wasn't just about one incident. It was about culture. About what people allow. when they think no one powerful is watching. And right now, no one had any idea who was watching. Keanu Reeves stood quietly in the lobby observing every detail, every reaction, every twitch of fear or smugness. The woman's eyes kept darting toward him as if searching for help. But no one stepped forward. Not the security guard frozen near the door. Not the receptionist who pretended to be busy typing something on her keyboard. Not the executives walking past, briefcases in hand, avoiding eye contact as if nothing had happened. It was astonishing. Some people whispered to each other, voices low as though discussing the weather. Others chuckled quietly on their phones, clearly filming the scene instead of stopping it. And the man, the one who had struck her, stood tall, grinning, completely unbothered. He adjusted his tie. He smirked. He glanced around the room like a predator surveying territory. "He's lucky no one's watching," someone muttered under their breath. Keanu didn't react immediately. He didn't need to. He could see everything, and the silence of the room said far more than words ever could. 7 minutes passed. Not a single person approached to ask if the woman was okay. Not a single person offered water. Not a single person tried to stop the man from walking away. Time stretched, the tension thickening with every passing second. Through the glass walls, the boardroom seemed alive with ignorance. Laughter echoed. Whiskey glasses clinked. Expensive watches gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The executives behind those walls had no idea that the man causing all the chaos was about to meet someone they couldn't ignore. The lobby became a test, a silent stage of arrogance and apathy. And it was failing miserably. Keanu's eyes followed each passing executive, each moment of distraction, each judgmental glance at the woman or him. They were judging appearances. His clothes, his worn shoes, his casual leather jacket. None of it mattered, but to them it did. And that's when it became clear. The disrespect wasn't just toward the woman. It was toward the environment. Toward decency. Toward the principle of respect itself. Somebody laughed too loudly on the phone. Another rolled their eyes at the receptionist. A third whispered a comment about dress code. Keanu's gaze remained calm, but his presence felt heavier with every passing second. You could sense it even if you couldn't see him move. Finally, the woman tried to steady herself, but her hands shook. She was human. She was vulnerable. And the people around her? They were not. Yet the most remarkable thing was that Keanu didn't rush. He didn't shout. He didn't raise a finger. He allowed them to reveal themselves. Because true character isn't shown in moments of kindness when it's convenient. It's revealed in moments like this, when someone has the chance to help, to intervene, to respect, and chooses not to. The man who had struck her smirked once more, looking around proudly. He believed himself untouchable. Everyone else, complicit in silence, seemed to agree. But Keanu Reeves wasn't here to intervene blindly. He was here to observe, to see the truth. And what he saw was staggering. The arrogance. The fear disguised as indifference. The entitlement. The absence of empathy. All of it lay bare in one brief, shocking moment. And just like that, the lobby became more than a place of disrespect. It became a mirror showing each person exactly who they were when no one powerful was watching. Backhand index pointing right. Has this ever happened to you? Have you been judged, or ignored, just because of how you looked or what others assumed about your importance? Because sometimes the quietest observers are the ones who matter the most. The lobby seemed frozen in time. 7 minutes of silence had passed. 7 minutes of smug confidence from the man who had struck her. 7 minutes of invisible observation from Keanu Reeves. Then finally he moved. Slowly. Deliberately. Each step measured. Not a rush, not a stumble, not a sign of impatience. Just quiet authority, unannounced but undeniable. The executives walking past barely noticed at first. They were too caught up in their own routines, their own conversations. Phones still in hands, briefcases still swinging. The man who had struck her, still grinning, didn't even look up. But then something shifted. Keanu reached the edge of the lobby. A subtle pause. A tilt of the head. And suddenly the air changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. But it was weighty, magnetic. The kind of presence that makes you suddenly aware of your own smallness. The man smirked, thinking this was another passerby. He leaned slightly, ready with a sarcastic comment, confident in his power. "Hey," he started. Keanu didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, crisp card. Nothing flashy. No threats. No signatures that screamed power. Just a card. Simple. White. Heavy in his hand. He walked straight up to the man. Calm. Controlled. Unflinching. The man's smirk faltered. A flicker of doubt passed across his face. What? He stammered. Keanu placed the card on the man's hand. A simple gesture, but its weight was impossible to ignore. Everyone in the lobby instinctively stopped. Phones dropped halfway to faces. Eyes widened. Murmurs died. Even the security guard froze mid-step, unsure whether to intervene or just watch. The man looked down at the card. His confidence wavered. A cold sweat ran down his temple. He barely recognized the handwriting scrawled across the white surface. He read it, slowly. Keanu Reeves, it said in understated, elegant lettering. Majority owner. The room went completely silent. A woman gasped softly. Executives exchanged glances, the color draining from their faces. Whiskey glasses, luxury watches, and whispered jokes in the boardroom suddenly felt meaningless. Every ounce of arrogance evaporated. The man who had struck her took a step back. His jaw tightened. He swallowed hard. Wire, the owner? He asked, voice cracking slightly. Keanu nodded once. Calm. Silent. Not smug. Not angry. Just present. And in that moment, the power dynamic shifted entirely. He didn't yell. He didn't storm the room. He didn't demand apologies. The card, the name, the presence, it was enough. The room, once brimming with laughter and arrogance, now felt fragile. Exposed. Vulnerable. You've had 7 minutes to see what people are willing to tolerate, Keanu finally said, voice low, measured. 7 minutes to show who you really are when you think no one important is watching. He paused, letting the words settle. Letting the weight sink in. The man who hit her clenched his fists, realizing in that instant that his perceived power was meaningless. And then, without another word, Keanu turned toward the woman. She could barely meet his gaze. Trembling, uncertain, relieved, scared, all at once. But he didn't just stand there. He walked beside her, silently acknowledging the injustice she had endured. The executives and employees didn't know where to look. Some averted their eyes, ashamed. Others froze, unsure of how to act. Because the truth was finally undeniable. The man they had feared, the man they had assumed could do whatever he wanted, had been powerless all along. And the one they had ignored, the one they assumed was insignificant, had been the most powerful in the room the entire time. And this was only the beginning. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Not a cough. Not a shuffle. Not even a whispered apology. Everyone knew something monumental had just happened. The man who had struck her no longer carried the air of confidence. He hovered uncertainly, a shadow of the arrogance he had walked in with. Keanu Reeves, however, did not celebrate. He did not gloat. He simply stood there, calm, observing the room, letting everyone fully understand the consequences of their earlier choices. His eyes, steady and piercing, scanned each face, executives, employees, witnesses, everyone. And then, before anyone could speak, the door at the far end of the lobby opened. An employee stepped in, holding a stack of files so high that a corner of paper drooped under its own weight. His hands shook slightly. His voice trembled even more. They were planning to sell the company, he said almost in a whisper. Behind closed doors, secret transfers, undisclosed deals, hundreds of jobs at risk. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Executives froze mid-step. Their faces went pale. A few instinctively tried to glance at each other, but the guilt in their eyes was unmistakable. The arrogance that had dominated the room moments ago was replaced with fear. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. He looked at the employee who had spoken, acknowledging the courage it took to step forward. Thank you, he said quietly. Now we know everything. The lobby, once filled with judgment and apathy, became a courtroom of truth. Every lie, every hidden agenda, every miscalculation was exposed. Not by confrontation or shouting, but simply by the presence of someone who mattered, someone who had the authority and the clarity to see it all. The man who had struck the woman swallowed hard. He realized that his personal abuse of power was now insignificant compared to the systemic betrayal he had been a part of. He had believed that small acts of cruelty could go unnoticed, but the bigger truth was undeniable. The corruption he and some of the executives had allowed was now exposed. Keanu Reeves stepped closer to the center of the room, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the rising panic around him. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply stated a fact. This isn't about one slap, one mistake, or one moment of disrespect. This is about a culture that allows people to feel untouchable. A culture where decisions are made without transparency. A culture where people believe they are more important than the truth. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You've shown me who you are, he continued, voice steady. Not in meetings. Not in reports. Not in spreadsheets or balance sheets, but right here, right now, in how you treat those you think have no power. The room remained silent. Some employees stared at their shoes. Others looked to the ceiling. A few covered their faces with their hands. All of them understood that the reckoning had begun, even if it hadn't been delivered yet. Then Keanu turned his attention to the man who had struck the woman. His expression didn't change, but the room could feel the authority behind it. "You believed you were untouchable," he said. "And in many ways you were. You could have continued to intimidate, to abuse, to manipulate. But power isn't given by fear. Power is measured by respect. And you have none." Security, previously idle, stepped forward. They didn't hesitate. The man was escorted out, stunned, powerless, finally confronted with the consequences of his actions. Even as the tension began to settle, Keanu Reeves wasn't finished. He addressed the remaining employees and executives with a quiet, unwavering authority. "This company will not be built on lies. It will not reward arrogance. It will not allow people to harm others because they believe they are untouchable. From this day forward, respect, honesty, and integrity will be the foundation. Not appearances, not titles, not fear." A ripple of relief ran through the women and men who had been watching silently, unsure if speaking up would ever matter. Now they knew. Speaking the truth had value. Doing the right thing, even when risky, mattered. Keanu glanced back at the woman, giving her a nod of acknowledgement. She exhaled, relief and gratitude washing over her. What had begun as an ordinary morning had transformed into a profound lesson about accountability, integrity, and the courage to confront injustice. And though the company had been on the verge of chaos, the bigger truth had emerged. The hidden deals, the secret plans, the silent betrayals, none of it would continue unchecked. Not while someone was watching who understood the real cost of silence. Backhand index pointing right. Should people like this, those who ignore others and abuse their power, ever be forgiven? Backhand index pointing right. Or is accountability the only path forward when truth is revealed? Because sometimes it's not just one slap that matters. It's the courage to uncover the bigger truth that changes everything. The lobby had gone completely silent. Not a whisper. Not a movement. Not even the faintest rustle of papers. The air was thick with the weight of revelation. The man who had struck the woman had been escorted out, his confidence shattered. The other executives and employees stood frozen, a mix of fear, guilt, and disbelief painted across their faces. Keanu Reeves remained calm. Every inch of him radiated control, authority, and clarity. No loud gestures. No threats. No theatrics. Just presence. A reminder that real power doesn't need to shout. It commands by being. He looked around the room. Slowly. Methodically. "This isn't about punishment," he said, his voice low, steady, unwavering. "It's about awareness. About accountability. About seeing people as they are, not as you wish to see them." The employees shifted nervously. Some swallowed hard. Some avoided his gaze entirely. Others looked at each other, realizing how complicit they had been in the moments of silence. "You've all been here long enough to know what I'm talking about," Keanu continued. "You've allowed disrespect to fester. You've chosen silence over courage. You've tolerated arrogance, cruelty, and deception. And now the consequences are clear." He paused, letting the words settle. "You might think I'm here to reward loyalty, to give second chances, to quietly walk away and let things continue as they always have. But you would be wrong." He took a measured step forward, locking eyes with several of the executives who had been the most brazen in their disregard. "I didn't come here to be recognized," he said. "I came to see how you treat people you think don't matter. How you behave when you think no one with power is watching. And you've all revealed exactly who you are." The room was still. The employees could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. The click of a keyboard somewhere in the distance. Every detail amplified, every breath drawn, every second measured. "You're all terminated," Keanu said simply. The words hit like a hammer. Terminated. Effective immediately. Shock rippled through the lobby. Faces turned pale. Hearts pounded. Some employees whispered desperate questions, their voices shaky. Others simply froze, realizing the depth of what had just been said. Security moved efficiently, calmly, and without hesitation. Those who had previously held power in small, quiet ways, the ones who believed their titles and connections could protect them, were suddenly powerless. The hierarchy they had relied on for confidence evaporated in seconds. The man who had been particularly cruel, the one who had smirked and laughed at the woman, had already been removed. But now, even those who had stood by silently, observing rather than acting, understood that inaction had consequences. Keanu walked slowly between the employees, his gaze never leaving theirs. Calm, present, judicious. He wasn't angry. He wasn't emotional. He was deliberate. "This is not vengeance," he said. "This is responsibility. This is accountability. You cannot hide behind titles, appearances, or fear. True character is revealed by how you treat those you believe have no power." The atmosphere in the room was thick with reflection. Fear, yes, but also awareness. A realization that the world could not be manipulated by arrogance or silence, that respect was not optional, and that integrity had consequences. Keanu stopped in the center of the lobby. He looked at the woman, standing quietly, still processing the earlier events. "Your actions, your courage, your honesty matter," he said. "And they will always be recognized. Let this be a lesson to all of you." For the first time, a few employees dared to lift their heads. Their faces were pale but attentive. Some nodded slowly. A few took deep breaths, realizing the gravity of what had just occurred and the clarity that had been delivered without a single raised hand or shouted word. Keanu's final words hung in the air like a verdict. Power without respect is meaningless. Arrogance without accountability is temporary. And silence in the face of injustice is never excused. The lobby remained quiet, but the energy had changed. The fear of consequence had transformed into the understanding of responsibility. Every action, every choice, every word, or lack thereof, was now measured by the truth that had been revealed. And while this was a moment of judgment, it was also a moment of clarity. A moment that would be remembered. A moment that would reshape the company forever. Because true leadership is not measured by who fears you, but by who you protect, and how you demand respect for all even when no one is watching. The lobby was quiet now. Not the heavy, tense silence of fear, but a calm, reflective stillness. The man who had struck the woman was gone. The executives who had allowed cruelty and arrogance to thrive were removed from power. And the employees who had once hesitated to speak up now understood the weight of their choices. Keanu Reeves stood in the center of the room, calm, composed, and unshaken. His presence was commanding, but it wasn't fear he inspired this time, it was understanding. He looked around at the faces before him. Some were pale, still processing the events that had unfolded. Others had tears in their eyes, not of fear but of relief. Relief that the reckoning had been fair, that justice had been restored, that truth had finally been recognized. This company, Keanu began, his voice low and deliberate, was built on more than profits, titles, and appearances. It was built on trust, on integrity, on respect. And today we are reminded what happens when those foundations are ignored. He walked slowly toward the woman who had been struck, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. "You are safe," he said gently. "And your courage, it matters more than you realize." Her eyes welled with tears and she nodded, swallowing hard. The tension she had carried all morning began to melt. She wasn't just relieved for herself. She realized that the reckoning had changed the environment for everyone in the room. Keanu stood again and turned to address the remaining employees. "I want you to understand something very clearly," he said. "Respect is not conditional. It is not something you give because someone has a title, a suit, or a position. Respect is shown in how you treat every person, especially those you think have no power. That is how true character is revealed." Heads nodded slowly. Some faces were pale, some tense, but all eyes were locked on him. "Today," Keanu continued, "we witnessed arrogance, ignorance, and indifference. And we corrected it, not with anger, not with violence, but with accountability, awareness, and the courage to act. That is what will define this company moving forward." The employees looked around. There was a sense of quiet reflection in the air. People who had been complicit in silence now realized the cost of inaction. People who had felt powerless before saw the weight of accountability. And most importantly, everyone realized that one person acting with integrity could change everything. Keanu's gaze softened slightly as he glanced at the executives who had remained, those who had chosen to follow the rules and act with honesty. "You who chose integrity," he said, nodding toward them, "understand the importance of this lesson. You are part of rebuilding trust. And part of this company's future will rest in how well you live up to it." Then he paused. The silence stretched. Every person in the lobby felt the magnitude of the moment. "This company," Keanu said finally, "will never again judge people by appearances, titles, or assumptions. Real power isn't about what you take, it's about what you protect. Real leadership isn't about fear, it's about respect. And real character is shown in the moments when no one is watching, except the truth." A few deep breaths were taken. The tension of the morning seemed to release from the room. Relief spread quietly among the employees. What had been fear was now replaced with hope, clarity, and a sense of purpose. Keanu turned toward the woman once more. "You were never powerless," he said softly. "And now neither is this company." The employees began to understand. The lesson wasn't just about one incident or one person. It was about the culture they were part of and the culture they would now help to build. Respect was no longer optional. Accountability was no longer avoidable. Integrity was no longer ignored. And in that moment, a transformation began. Not dramatic, not sudden, but real. The air in the room changed. People stood taller, breathed deeper, and recognized that their actions, their choices, and their words mattered. Keanu Reeves didn't raise his voice again. He didn't need to. The lesson had been delivered. The consequences had been felt. And the path forward was clear. "Let this be remembered," he said quietly, "not as a day of fear, but as a day of awakening. The true measure of success is not wealth, influence, or power. It is the courage to act rightly, the humility to treat others with respect, and the wisdom to see that everyone, no matter their status, deserves dignity." He stepped back, allowing the employees to absorb the moment. The woman who had been struck wiped her eyes, standing a little straighter now. Others whispered quietly to each other, processing the lesson. A few exchanged nods of agreement. And just like that, the room was no longer a place of fear and arrogance. It was a place of reflection, of understanding, of accountability. Keanu Reeves had entered unnoticed, witnessed cruelty, observed arrogance, and delivered justice, not with anger but with clarity, control, and principle. The company had been tested and the truth had prevailed. Respect had been restored. Integrity had been reaffirmed. And the culture, once broken by arrogance and indifference, had a chance to be rebuilt stronger than ever. Because sometimes it's not the loudest voice in the room that changes everything. It's the quiet observer who knows the truth, waits patiently, and acts decisively when the time is right. The lesson was clear. Power without respect is meaningless, and arrogance always reveals itself, if you're paying attention.